Arribem al final d'un dia dens, però també arribem densificats. Gràcies a tots per tot el que heu aportat en el dia d'avui i vull presentar-vos el Okri també dient per què l'he convidat. Vaig convidar el Okri per necessitat. Ell és un mestre nat de la narració. Per mi, els seus llibres són des de la primera pàgina una invitació a formar part d'una història que bascularà constantment entre els personatges principals i la complexitat del context en el que viuen. Un context que combina magistralment espais i temps fins a endinsar-se en un univers on somnis i realitats es troben com una veritable parella indissoluble. La realitat està feta de somnis, escriu a The Magic Lamp. Llegir-lo va suposar per mi un abans i un després en el meu estil de pensament. El fet que avui sigui aquí forma part de totes les meravelles que han anat passant des del dia d'ahir o, de fet, des de la preparació d'aquest encontre. En la nostra conversa repassarem alguns aspectes de la seva condició de creador d'històries i sentirem llegir fragments dels seus textos. Well, Ben, let's begin from the beginning. Thank you so much to be here and to invite me to interview you in front of such a number of common friends. Today we've been talking about the human capacity of creating stories. And I would like to start asking you, what does it mean to be a storyteller?
Well, well, before I answer that question, I want to say what a pleasure it is to be here. Can you hear me at the back? Yes? Good. I want to say what a very special pleasure it is to be here. And if I can say so, an even more special pleasure to see Lali again after so many years. Many stories have happened between us and happened in the time that we've known one another. What does it mean to be a storyteller? I think first of all it means taking the greatest interest in life. It means taking the greatest interest in your fellow human beings. I think it's impossible to be a storyteller, certainly impossible to be a good storyteller, if your heart is closed. So I think one thing that marks a great storyteller for me is that possibly their hearts are so open they're constantly wounded by life, by the reality of living. And by that I mean not just with the painful things. Beauty can wound you too, and so can happiness. I think also the other thing about being a true storyteller is to have a deep interest in the traditions, the long traditions of storytelling that you have inherited, either in terms of culture or in terms of the civilization that you're part of. Maybe one more thing I would say, crucial to being a good storyteller, is imagination. People misunderstand what imagination is. They think imagination is just being able to see things that are not there. But for me, imagination, its highest function is love. You can't have great imagination without love. It's a very strange equation. Because to imagine is not only to empathize, it's also to be able to see the consequences of all of our deeds. And maybe one last thing. I think that the storyteller is in touch with some strange, mysterious plasma, fluid in the universe that is both history, politics, culture, the future, the past. Too many qualifications.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when you say that the storyteller has to be with imagination, and imagination has to do with love, because actually the first tales we really create are mainly for our children. When the children are born, mothers start to invent stories for them.
Start telling them stories.
Yeah, and it's your mother comes about in different books, and especially in Star Book, when you start saying that this is a story my mother began to tell me as a child. The rest I gleaned from the book of life amongst the stars, in which all things are known. Then I imagine yourself just having this memory, taking a piece of paper and a pencil, lying in the floor, and there it comes, a book as big as this one, which in fact is this one. This idea of motherhood, which could be also translated to mother tongue or even to mother country. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a very big, big concept. Because, first of all, mother story, and there's a really big distinction between father stories and mother stories. And there's a big distinction between the fatherland and the motherland. And for me, the distinction is that the mother stories, and maybe also the mother tongue, is more than just a language. When we use the word mother tongue, when my mother's people use the word mother tongue, they mean the language, but also all the secret wisdom that's enriched it. The proverbs, the sayings of the elders, the words that mean more than one thing, depending on the context. Mother tongue has a lot of ambiguity. Mother tongue has in it a kind of storytelling which almost comes from the earth. The father tongue has got to do with the way in which society is organized. The father tongue and the father language and the father stories have to do with certain almost rigid perceptions of the hierarchies of society. I think of the father tongue or the father language as the language with which you are sent out into the world to hold the four structures of the land. They're very different. The mother tongue is more fluid than father tongue. Mother language is more ambiguous than father language. And motherland is very different from the actual land itself. Motherland also includes the ancestors. It includes the gods. Fatherland is, we could go on like this. But for me, storytelling came from my mother. And a very structured way of seeing came from my father. So my father was a lawyer, and he was like, Ben, you have to learn to think.
Mine also.
Right. My father said, you must learn to think straight. But my mother said, you must learn to listen. My father would say, you have to be a man. My mother would say, you have to understand how to exist in this world with other people. My father would say, you have to be like this. My mother would tell me a story.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, that is very clear in the family's road, isn't it? I mean, this little kid who has a father and a mother, and along all this amount of pages, you are describing the different people, the different characters, but especially mother and father, are very carried on for pages and pages until you can imagine a little bit how they are. But going into your books and into your literature, I would like to go a little bit on these words that are always appearing, like understanding, seeing, looking, thinking again, and how the characters in your books are talking to themselves and are saying to themselves, I was seeing something that nobody else is seeing, but that goes into a sort of introspection, which is very deep. And when we talk about these things in your books, understanding or seeing or looking or whatever, are they descriptive words or are they magical words? Because in somehow, they start being as we define them, but very soon, they come as taking us to another layer. And as your books have not as many pages as layers in each page. So this sort of going through and through and through. And then at a certain moment, I doubt if understanding or looking or seeing are from the magical era that we're living in, the age of magic.
Yeah, that's a very profound question, Lali. Another word you could have added to that is dream, or redream. Looking comes up in my work a lot because many of my characters, and actually the world that I grew up in, people are always looking at you. And there are many different levels to how people look at you. And it is quite terrifying as a child to be exposed to these different levels of looking. A look could be one of scrutiny. It could be scrutinizing your parents in you. People could be looking at you and they're saying, what kind of father does this person have? I can see their father. How terrible. Oh, I can see their mother. So they're looking at your ancestors in you. That's one kind of looking. And there's another kind of looking that is looking at your psyche, your spirit. There's another looking which is a looking that is meant to disturb. I'm very aware of that. You can almost call it a displacement looking. So in the famished road, you find Azaro is constantly talking about being looked at and the ways in which sometimes someone can look at you in such a way and you would be ill. And some people can look at you in such a way that you would suddenly gain an understanding that had nothing to do with words. It was just the way they looked at you and you understood something. So looking is extremely ritual, extremely powerful. Now, as for the looking that the characters do at the world, it's also an act of constantly trying to grasp what is almost ungraspable. The African reality is very layered. And the way in which you cope in it depends on how layered your looking is. And it's very easy to fail by looking wrong at a situation. So looking is one thing, seeing is another. Seeing is not just comprehending what you're looking at. Seeing is also willing what you're looking at. So seeing can be very active. Seeing can be ritual. You can have a ritual scene. You can see a situation, and it seems to be a normal situation, but with a certain kind of person, that situation has potential for magic because they see it. My father had that kind of seeing. My father had something of the shaman in him. For my father, every leaving of the house is a journey that requires a ritual act. a door that is opened for my father is something quite different from a door that is opened.
It's also for you.
And for me. Understanding is a very, very difficult one. Because understanding is something that the characters are constantly trying to do because the world itself is so complex. Because at any given time, the way the world appears to be is not the way the world is. Every situation can be read in so many different ways. One thing about growing up in Africa is that you're taught almost from 1 or 2 years old, you're taught to read the world. You're taught to read situations. You're taught to read people. So you're constantly reading or trying to read. It's as if the world is a constant enigma. Yeah, such a big question.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it tells a lot to me now about my experience of reading your books, because when you say that the way you look, it can be opening for you a new horizon, and it can take you to another world, let's put it that way. At the same time, I think it's very related, or maybe it's related also with health and disease, because
yes.
in your books, whenever something really, or someone or a situation looks at you in a certain way, you just die, or you just need to begin again, or just stay in bed for 3 days without eating and doing nothing but waiting for the health to come. Yeah. And that is something which is very nice, and as there are quite a number of doctors over here, I like very much this idea of this doctor who's just looking at you, starts getting you into health again, and others that immediately you feel worse.
You feel much worse, absolutely, absolutely. Not just doctors, there are friends that we have who are like that.
Yeah. Then in all that, as you relate that to your African origin, it's a lot of myths and a lot of stories and a lot of memories connected to that. And then it began this point of this gap or connection between dreams and reality. And I doubt if in your books reality is what we call dreams and dreams is what we call reality, or
they constantly interchange. You're right.
Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, reality and reality and dream. It's not just Africa. I think most great civilizations have always have felt a strange interchange between reality and dream. It's there in the ancient Greek world. It's there in Greek tragedy. It's there in all the great literatures of the world. It's here in Spain.
Yeah.
Reality is, for one thing, reality is not absolute. We cannot say absolutely what reality is, because reality is always inflected by consciousness. And that very inflection, that very filter of consciousness already has done something to reality. Already. Just our very experiencing of reality has already mediated it. And that mediating gives a dreamlike quality to it. But then if you turn it the other way around, our experience of dream is so real that our consciousness of dream infects dream with a sense of reality. I had to get up very early this morning because I was coming here to meet all of you. And I had to wake up very early. And I had my alarm on. And at the exact moment that my alarm came on, I was actually having a dream that was so vivid that when I woke up, I was totally confused. I had literally swung from one reality into another. And like going through a door. And to this moment, I'm puzzled as to which is more real. But the African reality is constantly sprinkled with dreamlike elements.
Yeah, well, I really like when in your books there is someone who is part of a dream of someone else's, in the sense that it's a character that goes from one dream to another, and it's like a labyrinth of people getting into the dreams of other people. And in that sense, I think that you build part of the reality you want to transmit with this connection of dreamings of different people. Is that so?
Yeah, you expand the reality of a world. That's because that's how I experienced my African reality growing up. I talk about the strange experience of walking down a street, and I'm using the word street, which already has elements of modernity in it, rather than a village road or a village path. And the experience of it is moving from what we consider to be the contemporary world into almost like a continuum of the African world, which weaves through it. And this can take the form of a face, just someone's face. You're going down the street and you just see this face, and you're in another world, just like that. Or it could be a smell, or it could be a voice of someone heard in the distance, singing. Or it could be a tortoise that you see at the side of the road. So what I'm trying to say is that the reality is broken by or woven through with mythic elements, that when you pay attention to them, your consciousness goes somewhere else. For a storyteller, that's very, very difficult. So you need a new kind of story to be able to do that.
The Abiku children are part of that?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you explain to people who didn't read you yet
what an Abiku child is? We have this concept in West Africa of a child that is born, and sometimes they don't like reality. They turn up in this world and they know how terrible it is, and they can will themselves to die, and they go back to the spirit world. But then they come back again, sometimes to the same mother. It's a cycle of births of the same person. They turn up, they die, and then they come back again. And in some traditions, they mark them, so that when they come back again, they'll have that mark, and you can recognize that, it's you've come back. And the thing about Abiku children, I call them spirit children, is that they are half human, half spirit. And they often have a very strange way of looking at the world. They're literally able to see the presence of spirits. And they're very strange children. They very rarely grow up to become adults. In order for them to become adults, a very special sacrifice, very special ritual has to be done that makes them want to live. So the Abiku, the spirit child, is an existential child. And there's a big question mark about what we've done to the world. They're rebels.
And you, as a storyteller, you feel close to these kind of children?
Yeah, very.
Do you think you are one of those?
My sister was, not me. But I grew up with a lot of them around me. If I were one, I don't think I could have written about one and survived it. It's a very scary thing to write about because you're dealing with very, very powerful mental and cultural constructs. I mean, these spirit children have their companions in the spirit world that call them away from life. It's quite frightening. Mothers are frightened of spirit children, and they have to lavish on them a lot of love to give them reasons to stay in this world. That's why I like them as metaphors, because they make me ask the question, you know, why should we live? Why should we stay here when we can quit? So a lot of my writing is about finding very deep, transcendentally existential reasons to live in spite of horrible conditions in the world.
But you also say sometimes that Africa itself is like an Avico country, Avico continent.
No, I said nations.
Nations.
Yeah. Nations are sometimes like spirit children. And I use it as a metaphor in places, in some parts of Nigeria, some parts of Africa, where nations keep going through this cycle of dying and being born again. And the nations have to make a decision as to whether they're going to stay or not. And it's a very big decision for a nation to make. And sometimes it takes a civil war for a nation to say, okay, we're going to stop messing around with dying. We're going to be here, and we're going to be great.
We were yesterday talking about journeys, and
Yes.
we were having a paleontologist who was explaining how the human people really developed themselves and appeared when some special kind of monkeys just left the boots. And that was so strange because they are made to be living in boots. And he was saying that started in Africa long ago, and we are still trying to understand how the life out of the boots could be. And I feel that is also very present in your books. You have always boots there, trees there, that make things obscure or more clear, or the place where strange people live, or, I mean, the idea of going through one of these forests. I would like you to say something about the forest.
No, it's just that forests are dying in the world. And I'm very conscious of the loss of forests in the world. You fly through many parts of the world and you just see cities, you just see parks. You don't see forests. And I think for me, forest is a place of imagination. The forest for me represents the deep psyche of the human spirit. Forest represents for me maybe even the secret home of culture. And I think something in our imagination dies the more we lose forests. The forests in England, you can't call them forests. You can just call them a population of trees. Because a forest is something that is it's not just trees. It's also the way in which it's as if the land dreams. There's something about this, there's something very powerful. Forests are where myths come from, the idea of spirits. Forests are where the ancestors retreat into. The forest is partly the home of death and partly the home of renewal. The forest is a very, very strange and powerful thing. And it's very hard to explain that when we're losing forests in the world.
Yeah, let's go from losing forests to losing your own words. In the Famish Road again, is this character, this governor, or I don't know what it is.
Governor General.
Yeah. That starts to change the name to everything in order to arrive to change reality that way and make it suitable for him or for his civilization. And this is something that it's very present in this 3 days conference, how you label things and what's going on when you change a label or add a label or translate a label. And that has a glorious few pages in your books. And I would refer that, I mean, the trees in the forest as the words in things, labeling everything and allowing us to understand everything. Could we make a sort of movement through that?
Yeah, we're talking about how names change reality. It's true. The hills that I grew up around in Nigeria, we have one name for them, but there's another English name for them, and in a sense, it's one hill with 2 names, but actually it's 2 hills. And that's one of the first things that's done in history. When you want to take over, change, colonize a reality, the first thing you do is you change its name. And we have the same problem here today in modern times. When we want to demonize a people, we have one set of words for them. A good example is the word immigrant. There was a time when the word immigrant was not a bad word. It just meant someone who has made a journey from somewhere else into another reality. Many characters in the Odyssey were immigrants. People left home, went and fought wars, and then stayed. They were immigrants. It's part of the human story. But it's only in the latter part of the 20th century that immigrant became something that you feared and you hated and you had political policies about. But it's just in that word. I think constantly that one of the first things we have to do to fight the problems of our age is to actually change the names that we've given to those things.
Yeah, that is important now here, because I remember that the first time I was thinking about that is when I read that Nelson Mandela it was not his name, but it was given to him because there is a teacher that considered that his name was difficult to pronounce. And now we have quite a number of kids coming from Africa and staying here with us. And fathers and mothers who take care of them, they have, questioned themselves about keeping their names or giving names which are more easy here going. And I think that in your literature, if you read your books, that is something that is not casual or it's not something that you can think about. It's very profound. And that's why I was asking that, because...
But there's another side to this, because we have this wonderful tradition in Africa of renaming people. If you were to come to my village, for example, people will look at you for a bit. Sometimes they'll look at you, you're over there, but they'll look at you, they'll be looking straight like this, but they're looking at you. And after a while, they'll give you a name. It could be one who speaks many words in one, as one word. But the name that they'll give you will be a quality, a very special quality that's been noticed about you. That kind of naming is a magnification. It's kind of making you aware of an aspect of yourself that you might not have been aware of. Or it's giving you a quality, or it's even empowering you with a quality. So it's the intention of the naming that counts, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're great namers. We're great renamers.
And you refer to that when you write titles like The Age of Magic, or you're thinking in something else? Because you have the Age of Magic, but you also have the magic, the lamp, and there is a lot of magics in your...
But naming is an act of magic. Naming is either an act of magic or it's an act of destruction.
Wow. Now, let's take a pause. And...
Are you all okay out there?
No. Yeah. You're okay with that, what we're
Yes.
doing?
No. What? To what?
I don't know. I don't understand. I can't be in the Age of Magic and in reality Barcelona 2018. I don't know. So let's go. I lost my moment.
Shall I read something?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Yeah. Shall we? Do you want to read?
Shall I start with that?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I just thought I should share some thoughts with you from just fragments from different books, if that's okay. I'm going to read extracts from an essay I wrote specially for this conference called The Humanity of the Humans. And one of the questions I was interested in is, how do we lose the humanity of the human? How do we lose the humanity of the human? I think it begins with a refusal to know, a refusal to feel. It begins with the dangerous thinking that we are somehow more human than others, and that somehow they do not belong to our species. This kind of inhuman thinking transcends race and creed. It was there in the Nigerian Civil War. It was there in Rwanda. It is here now in Europe. It was there in Northern Ireland and in Bosnia and in the Spanish Civil War. In this conference called The Humanity of the Humans, I think we should declare, first of all, that the human race is still in the childhood of what it means to be human. 5,000 years of recorded civilization, and we have not yet learned to live out the rudimentary meanings of what it is to be human. If the fury and the occasional magnificence of history is anything to go by, it seems to me that we have been stumbling about in a kind of blindness. Our great works of art, our great moments in science, have been brief moments of splendor in forests of darkness. If I have focused on one aspect of the inhumanity of the human, it is because the immigration crisis is symptomatic of a large hole that has eaten its way into the human heart. The common thought among contemporary philosophers is that humanity is what we have in place of God. It is clear to me that humanity is not enough when we can so easily be inhumane. Maybe this is the time to re-examine the well springs of humanity, to investigate what it is that truly connects us. Clearly, the fact that we all belong to the same species is no longer enough to inspire in us a sense of solidarity. I think something deeper connects us, which stories hints at, something numinous that transcends our apparent differences. I think we need something that will restore our sense of being members of a great universal family again. Whatever myths or central beliefs we have killed off in the last few centuries is not really working. It has helped to make us colder in the soul and maybe a little more indifferent. It has helped to kill off, one by one, the mysterious lights of our humanity. Slowly, we're becoming technicians of life, measuring our value by the techniques of our economy and military and technological success. Increasingly, modern man and woman does not understand myth, and our stories are becoming drier, more pragmatic, more based on the evidences that science can deliver. And finally, I think we need new stories for the stranger human beings that we are becoming every day. We need new stories to reach deep into what is still left of the human in us. In the old myths, where they spoke of a spring that has died or a fountain that has dried, we used to know instinctively what that meant. It was a crucial point in myth. Today we have the vast oceans, the many rivers, and the Mediterranean, but the waters of humanity are imperceptibly drying up. They say that the lack of water will be the cause of future wars. The waters are drying up. We are perishing for lack of water for our souls. It turns out there is, after all, a fate in images.
Can you read a little bit more either of the Magic Lamp or your little new book?
Okay, I'll read a little from The Mystery Feast. This is a little book, tiny little book I wrote on storytelling.
It's a wonderful book about what does it mean to create a story. It's like treasure.
I like little books. Maybe because I've written big ones. I'll just follow my instincts, yeah? Mm-hmm. There is nothing that expresses the roundedness of human beings more than storytelling. Stories are the highest technology of being. At the heart of all science, its experiments, its theories, its mathematics, its discoveries, its interpretations, is the story instinct. Maybe this storytelling quality of being is the principal magic as well as the principal illusion of our lives. Stories bear the same relation to us that dreams do, except that stories are coherent dreaming. No civilization ever became great on knowledge alone. When they want to destroy a people, they begin by telling stories about them. Even when negative stories about a people are not believed, they still leave an imprint on the underside of the mind, a residuum of doubt, a sinister grain that in time can become an evil pus of perception. The ancient Greeks did it with the Persians. The Romans, with stories, built Carthage into a monstrous foe which must be exterminated. They did it with Africa during the slave trade. They did it with the Jews before the Holocaust. They did it with the Tutsis. They did it with black South Africans during apartheid. And they're doing it now to one group of people or another. And they do it through rumors in the media and with our passive collusion. Whenever we listen to negative stories about others, we are contributing to this ongoing preparation for some unforeseen future monstrosity. A nation is shaped by the stories its children are told. At the end of this little book, I've got notes to a modern storyteller. They're just notes to myself, really. Here's one of the notes. A story is not a thing. It is a perpetual potentiality. Maybe the life of a nation, its health, its spiritual strength, can be deduced from the stories the nation tells, the stories it suppresses, the stories it sanctions.
Can I tell you something? When a storyteller writes a story, doesn't have the need of telling it out loud to people.
That's such a big question. No, sometimes a storyteller can tell a story to themselves. But
yeah, but in a sense, for instance, this whole 3 days are devoted to John Berger, which was a very close friend, and we love him. And he was defining himself as a storyteller, as you. And listening, he loved to read stories to people and used to come here and read stories. And I hope that that is the first of your comings. And then will be the possibility of having you reading quite a number of times. Because then the people who read your books begins to read it with your voice. And then it's like opening up. It's like a cloud that is full of water is going to rain on top of you.
It's a magic key.
Exactly. Yeah. And then as I always thought that, I thought that maybe a storyteller who can say, once upon a time I was in Nigeria and a fire was going to take place there, is something lacking, is not?
There are two kinds of stories. There are stories that need the voice, the actual physical human voice, to populate the universe. And then there's another story that needs silence. The funny thing is that the stories that need silence also need a voice, but they need a voice inside the head.
Well, the age of magic is that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you think so.
Well, I mean, all the words are there to create the silent space.
But you know the first story I talked about that needs the voice? That story, that kind of story also needs silence. Because all the great storytellers I used to listen to as a kid, when they start to tell you a story, they would say something like, now I'm going to tell you a story about how Timbuktu became, and they'll pause. And you'll be like, became what? But that's part of the story.
Yeah. Well, this is Once Upon a Time and 3 dots.
Yes.
I mean, the mystery is the 3 dots.
Exactly.
More than the beginning. Oh, yeah. I don't know. I think we should either listen a little bit more reading of you, giving them the possibility of talking to you. I mean...
Should I read them one of these from the Magic Lamp?
Why not?
Yeah?
Why not?
This is my latest book. It's called The Magic Lamp. And it's actually a collaboration between me and an artist, a painter, a Scottish painter called Rose McCluney, who's an old friend of mine. And I take one of her paintings and live with it for 6 months. And sometimes I'll go into the painting, and then I'll come out with a story. And I've written 25 paintings. And it took me 5 years to kind of live in the stories, live in the paintings, and come up with stories. They're very beautiful paintings, and I'm going to read you just one. But before I do, I want to talk to you about that painting I keep drawing people's attention to. And I always ask people what it is they see first about that painting. When you look at it, what is it that you notice first? You can speak. You're allowed to say something. Who's that? Who's that? Can you say it again a bit louder?
Qui ha dit alguna cosa? Mountain.
Mountains. Okay, anything else? A boy. Anything else? A horse. Anything else? That thing in the center. Yeah. No idea what it is. Exactly. It could be a face or it could be a song. Okay, shall I tell you what I see after 3 months of living with that? The first thing I see, and it's important because it's related to what we're talking about here. The first thing I see is that big space in the middle. In most paintings, go home and look at the paintings of Matisse or Miro or Dali. You would not see that quantity of space in the middle of a painting. And that quantity of space is the reason why I started writing stories to her paintings. Because that space is a space of invitation, it's a space of imagination. It's a space that says, you can come in. I'm not keeping you out. Come in. Take a look at the world inside. Yeah? That's a space of imagination, it's a space of invitation. Yeah? And in all my writing, I'm interested in that space. So one of the stories I'm going to read to you is a story called Life is a Street Corner, where she is constantly fusing faces and cities, faces and buildings. And this story will make it clear. Life is a street corner. A face is where many roads meet. One road cannot make a city. It takes many roads to make life a fiesta. A face is where many rivers meet. It is where times meet. Each person is a marketplace. On days when there is a hint of a rainbow in all things, do you not sense that buildings that have sustained our gaze begin to look like us? Through those invisible greens and purples in the air, we look upon some facade and see our faces there. Cities are portraits of our minds. That portrait is best where a touch of silence surrounds the figure. On a building where 3 streets meet, a delicate face is discerned. This face is made of all that dreaming, all that suffering. Beauty squeezed from time. Life is a minaret. Life is a crowded square, a stock exchange, the winding shores of a river. Life is also eloquent in the pastel of a street corner where silence meets destiny.
Then the organization is being a little bit tough. And I know that there's thousands of things I would like to talk to you with them, not just you and me, and to have my granddaughter listening to you from over there, the little one.
Wow, hello.
And my goodness gracious. But I don't want you to go without reading a little bit of this African poem.
Okay.
Could you do that?
Okay. Do you want to tell them about it first, though?
Which one, you mean?
Oh, I'm going to read Healing the Africa Within.
Yeah.
Is that the one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Is it... I have fragments from it, but you have the whole thing?
I have the whole thing. Should I just read some, or do you want fragments? Let me see your fragments.
Let me see your fragments.
because otherwise we might be here a while. Can you find your fragments?
I will. Well, in the 2 seconds I'm going there, tell them a story.
Does anybody here paint? Is there any painter? Are you all writers and readers? Yeah? Oh, there's one painter in the audience. Wow, okay. Is there anybody here who likes looking at paintings? 7 people. Oh, 10 people. 20 people. Okay. Why do you like looking at paintings? It can't be the same reason. Okay. Well, I'll tell you why I like looking at paintings. I like looking at paintings because they give me another way of looking at reality. I think that part of the problem of the world is that we have a very limited way of looking at reality. We have a fixed way of looking at reality. But reality seems to me to be a constant potentiality. It shrinks in accordance with the smallness of your vision, or it expands in accordance with the greatness of your vision. And for me, looking at paintings, really good paintings, can sometimes liberate our seeing. I think what we need in this world more than anything else is liberated seeing.
I don't have it. I don't find it. I don't know.
No, I'll make some. Shall I choose? I'll choose some. The essay I'm going to read, it's not really an essay. It's a set of fragments. It's called Healing the Africa Within. And it's about a new way of looking. 1. Heart-shaped Africa is the feeling center of the world. 2. Continents are metaphors. 3. A people are spiritual states of humanity as distinguishable in what they represent as roses, lions, and stars. 4. Have we forgotten what Africa is? 5. Africa is our dreamland, our spiritual homeland. 6. There is a realm in everyone that is Africa. We all have an Africa within. 7. When the Africa outside is sick with troubles, the Africa inside makes us sick with neurosis. 9. We have to heal the Africa in us if we are going to be whole again. 14. It is possible to suffer without knowing it. 15. We have to heal the Africa within. We have to rediscover the true Africa. The Africa of laughter, of joy, of improvisation and originality. The Africa of myths and legends, storytelling and playfulness. The Africa of generosity, of hospitality and compassion. The Africa of wisdom, mysticism, and divination. The Africa of paradox, proverbs, and surprise. The Africa of magic, faith, patience, and endurance. We have to rediscover Africa. The first encounter with Africa by Europe was the wrong one. It was not an encounter. It was an appropriation. What they saw and bequeathed to future ages was, in fact, a misperception. They did not see Africa. This wrong seeing of Africa is part of the problems of today. What you see is what you make. What you see in a people is what you eventually create in them. 18. It is now time for a new seeing. It is now time to clear the darkness from the eyes of the world. 19. The world should begin to see light in Africa, see its possibilities, its beauties, its genius. 20. If we see it, it will be revealed. We only see what we are prepared to see. We only see anew. We only see anew what is revealed to us. 21. Africa has been waiting for centuries to be discovered with the eyes of love. 22. There is no true seeing without love. 28. It's Africa's turn to smile. 29. That would be the loveliest gift of the 21st century, to make Africa smile again. Thank you. I would have liked to have dedicated this conversation to Pep Suburos. So if I can do that in retrospect. Is that allowed?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that as far as I know, you've been twice in this place, in the CCCB. The first time Pep invited you. Yeah. The second one I invited you. Yeah. And you read that text in the both times. So.
Well, with my African thinking, Pep is here with us.
I am also with you now.
Thank you.
Gràcies a tots per venir i per compartir aquest moment tan màgic.